let it see if a couple people come on before we start. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and get going. So, thank you all for coming here tonight. We're here for our How to Run for Office seminar in Union Township, and we're live streaming this on Facebook, so there'll be a record of it for other people to use, because competition is good, people running is good, people getting more involved is good. And so we have a panel of experts here on all subjects that are going to talk about different things related to running for office. Couple things, I got it kind of the wrong order. Here is on this Thursday, we have a thing called our club has a thing called the Movies the Woke Movement Doesn't Want You to See series of movies. So we had Blazing Saddles and Dirty Harry so far. And the third movie that people haven't heard of is this one. They heard of the other two, but The Net, which is one of Sandra Bullock's first ever lead roles in a movie. And it's like from the 1993, 94, and it's about her whole identity getting erased by big tech. So just one day, everything about her is gone. Her bank accounts, everything is gone. So it's great. I remember watching it back in the day. My wife watched it recently. She'll watch stuff while she's working. She's an artist. And she's like, oh, it's like eerie watching the stuff that happens in the movie to Sandra Bullock. But it's one of her first, I think it was either her first or second movie after Speed. So, and where she was the lead in the movie. So that's on Thursday at RJ Cinema and Tap Room, which is right next to Jungle Jam. We have a social time, but we're making it a little longer from 6 to 7:30, and then the movie is at 7:30, so you can come for one or both of those things. And everybody's welcome, even if you're not part of the club, even if you're not a Republican, because it's a pretty good movie, and that's a great place over at RJ's. The other thing is, on Sunday, we're participating in the Claremont County Fair. And fair parade, and we'll be selling some things there as well, and we'll have a good time, I think, there. You know, you see our slogan, we have our professional logo, and then we have our fun logo that's Western Claremont County Republican Club. So, but join us at the fair. Now, for this seminar, we have the agenda. We're going to do some introductions of people here. And then we're going to get kind of into our agenda. But let's start with the introductions of the panel. First, Ken Henning.
Hello, everyone. I am Kenny Henning. I am the Southwest Ohio Regional Liaison for Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose. I work directly with the boards of elections in the 14 Southwest Ohio counties, from Mercer and Auglaize County are my two most northern counties, down 75 to Hamilton and Claremont. So thank you all for being here tonight. Obviously, also, I am here on personal time, not here in the state capacity or on state time, so thank you.
And if there's, I think it's safe to say that subject to your personal time availability and permission from the spouse, other groups, regardless of their politics, that would be interested in having you participate.
Exactly, yeah. Honestly, we've presented in front of both party central committees before, as they've had inquiries for campaign finance, or back in 2019 when counties got new voting machines, we went with the boards of elections and showed the committees their new voting system. So, yeah, nice being with you all tonight.
Hello, my name is Nick Owens. I'm a local attorney in private practice. I've been in private practice for a little over a year. Prior to that, I was an assistant prosecutor in Brown County for about 7 years. Prosecuted all types of offenses, everything from speeding tickets to murder. Also, prior to that, I worked for our local area member of Congress, including time in Washington and Cincinnati offices. I was, from 2017 until the end of last year, was the state school board member for this area. That was 17 counties, almost 1 million constituents. I chose not to run for re-election, and then last year I ran for state rep in the District 66 primary. I finished second, but through that process, I became an FBI informant as a part of the Larry Householder operation. I went to the FBI during the primary over some real serious concerns that I had with illegal spending, and so I played just a small part in that, not a major part, but I'm glad to be here.
All right, Tom.
I'm State Representative Tom Brinkman, representing the 27th Ohio House District, which is eastern Hamilton County, starting at the river with Anderson Township, working all the way up till to the Hamilton County part of Loveland, including Indian Hill and Sims, and I live in Mount Lookout, which is in the city of Cincinnati, which is a small portion of that district. I am serving my 8th and final term in the Ohio House. I served for 4 terms from 2001 to 2008, and then after sitting out for 6 years, came back to serve another halfway through year 7 right now.
And John.
I'm John McGraw. I'm a Union Township trustee, so welcome to the Union Township Civic Center. But I'm here tonight to talk a little more from the local level and a smaller campaign level. And I think that's the best way to get started. Some people might want to jump right in and run for governor, but I think it's good to start out on a smaller scale, and we'll talk about all that tonight. But I think I can bring some insight to getting started and how you make things go.
We know a guy that jumped in and ran for president. So you can't just jump in and run for something very high. So the agenda tonight is Ken from the Secretary of State's office is going to talk about some of the key rules, and there's a handout here, and we will give that to other people, put it online and so forth. Then we're going to talk, we're going to kind of after that do a panel type thing as we go, but progressively through some different subjects. And anybody can talk, but we're going to talk about, I think Tom Brinkman has a great things to talk about being an insider or outsider and what you do during a campaign. John McGraw talking about personal politicking and campaigning and political identity. And then Nick can talk about sign strategy, and he's become familiar with all sorts of things, PACs, TV spends, all that kind of stuff. And the best resources, and then last I have a handout that's best resources in this area for candidates that might be running for office. It's important to know if you're watching this that the election coming up in November is an off-year election, and the key things coming up are township trustees. Every township has 2 trustees up for election. School boards, every school board other than a municipal school board, district school board, who can have different rules, but every school board other than that has 3 of 5 positions up. Sometimes they might be an extra one if somebody was filling out a partial term of somebody and they have to stand for election, but 3 of 5, so those are the big things. And then the next big thing after that is to be the primary for 2022, which will be state reps, statewide. You know, that's an on-year election, and that will be in May of 2022. Is when that will take place. So Ken's going to take you through just some of the rules and regs and the basics, and we can keep it interactive if people have questions as he goes. But he's going to kind of focus. There's a big deck there. He's going to kind of focus on the highlights. So let me turn it over to Ken, and that's forward.
Cool.
And the other one is backwards. And the next chart should be yours, Ken. There we go.
Well, as I said, I am Kenny, and I do work for the
You
Ohio.
can stand up if you want.
Yeah.
To make.
I do work for the Ohio Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, Ohio's 51st Secretary of State. And like I said, I oversee the Southwest Ohio region. So down, my 2 most southern counties are Hamilton and Claremont. I do have the privilege of working with 14 county DOEs, so that's 14 directors, 14 deputy directors. Do you all know that boards of elections here in Ohio are equally bipartisan, 50% Democrat, 50% Republican staffs? And I've had the privilege of working with the Claremont County board since we've started, since 2019. You just got a new director last Monday, Stephanie Hemmerheit.
Yep.
She was with the board for, I want to say maybe 9 years, and Julia Carney was the former director, moved to the prosecutor's office. So excited to continue working with Stephanie and Chris as they move forward.
And if you stand over by the charts, I think it'll make it easier for people to see both you and the charts. So, Chris, we're kind of zoomed in, and I'll put these charts online for anybody that's watching, so that you have the access to these.
Yeah, so I did like hearing, we do have some people in here that were saying that they're interested in being a future candidate, and future candidates, you need to understand campaign finance. So we're going to talk about that tonight and the role it plays with our office. So as you can imagine, once you decide to run and pull petitions and file at your local boards of elections, you also do have campaign finance rules that you do have to take into consideration. And with that, the first thing you need is to designate a campaign treasurer for your committee. That individual will accept and deposit any contributions that you get, and they'll also monitor and record all activity with your campaign's finances. They are also the individuals to file the reports that we'll go over later, and they understand the liability that comes with that. The treasurer is in charge of opening the bank account. Obviously, you want to keep it separate from personal uses. It's most cases banks do require you to get a IRS CIN number, and that's something you can do. I want to say over the phone. That's required by most banks. The retention schedule for all statements is also 6 years, so it's important that you have someone as treasurer that does bookkeeping very well and keeps everything in order for you, especially if there are discrepancies that ever do come up. Where to file. So it depends on what type of office you're running for. So for the individuals here that said they wanted to run for school board, a local office, you would file at your local board of elections here in Claremont County in Batavia. If you were running for the Ohio House, Senate, statewide offices, the Supreme Court, you would file with our office. And any federal position that you were to run for, you would file with the FEC, President, U.S. Senate, House of Representatives. There are different variations of candidates also. Individuals that run for local, especially smaller villages and local school boards, sometimes don't need to raise as much funds as others. So we'll go over these. There's the filing fee only candidates, no contributions or expenditures. Short form candidate, no activity prior to January of the election year. You spend or receive $500 or less. You can file just the cover page for the post-primary and post-general reports. There's the out-of-pocket candidate. Candidate pays for everything, but you still have to file your designation of treasurer at the Board of Elections. And then the local candidate waiver for municipal offices. You're gonna raise less than $5,000 annually and less than $2,000 in contributions / expenditures. No more than $100 a person, and the waiver ends at the end of the election year. At the end of this, I'll also be giving you my contact information. I give you our cards, my card, and then if you ever have questions, I can get you connected with the Board of Elections or someone from our campaign finance office too. So these are the different candidates we just went over, local. It's important that no matter what type of candidate you are, you want to keep full, accurate accounting records.
I think it's important though, the 2000, if you do the local candidate waiver, you don't have to file financial reports if you agree you're spending less than 2,000, is my understanding.
Yeah, I'd have to look at 3517.
Yeah, so when you go in, anything Mr. Henning says or anybody says, you should check the campaign finance guide and so on and so forth.
Yes.
But the benefit to small races, if you're under 2,000, like on a school board race or something like that, you don't have to do the financial reporting if you sign a form. I've watched somebody next to me signing it at the Board of Elections.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to do finance reporting if you pledge you're not going to spend more than 2,000.
Yep. Filers with the Board of Elections. So, I don't know if it was this year or last year, I forget. I think it was the end of last year. Now local candidates can file online, and I forget when that was implemented. But I do know that local candidates have enjoyed being able to file their reports online versus having to go into the Boards of Elections. It's something that is newer with our office. We are getting remarks from individuals about how much they like it. They're coming to us with ideas as to how to tweak it. So we are taking all that into consideration, and as it evolves, I think it'll be something that candidates do enjoy, just because they can do it from the comfort of their own house and they don't have to go and file paperwork at the Board of Elections. State filers with the Secretary's office, the state rep candidates, state Senate candidates, etc., are required to do the electronic filing that is in place with our office already. When to file, and all this is at the Board of Elections. There's always a poster there at the Board of Elections, at the Secretary, on the Secretary's website, a lot of times in social media, etc. It goes over these dates, and you have the primary, general, special related filings. The pre-election report is the 12th day before, covers any activity through the 20th day before. The post-election report is filed the 30th day after the election, covers activities through the 31st day after. And then you have your non-election related filings, the semi-annual and the annual. Judicial candidates do not need to file the semi-annual. I don't think we've had anyone here. Clerk reports is what you said you were running for, okay. And then the annual is filed the last business day of January, which covers any activity through December. This is an example of the graphic that we're using this year. Like I said, the Board of Elections has this printed out at their office. It's on our website. It's all over the place. So we are pretty, we're transparent when it comes to this, so people know filing deadlines. What to file? You want to file any money that comes into your campaign, contributions, other income, loans, etc., and then money out, expenditures, anything that goes towards running your campaign. I had an individual here tonight ask about the non-monetary activity, and if you ever have questions about in-kind contributions, feel free to email us and we can help you get that understood a little bit better. But there is a list of in-kind contributions coming up on a couple pages that we'll go over. But anyone that's over 7 has to be listed as a contributor. Political PACs, contributing entities, business entities, corporations are not permitted to give directly. I don't know if you all knew that or not. Fundraising events use separate forms, and the contribution limit for cash contributions is $100 per contributor for each election. With that, when you go to report contributions, you want to always capture the name of the contributor, the address, the date received, the amount received, employer, the form of how it was donated, whether it was cash, check, or credit card. And loans are reported on a separate form that is filed with each report until the loan is forgiven from the candidate or paid off. Reported contributions. This was for the fundraising events. Contributions reported must be itemized in any amount. If it's received at a fundraiser, no more than $25 each may be reported as contributions received, $25 or less, not based on ticket price, and the campaign committee must obtain all contributor data regardless. If you do raffles, the 2 transactions to disclose are when an item is donated, the fair market value of the item as an in-kind contribution, and if you purchase the item, you want to put down the full value of the purchase price for the raffle. Reporting contributions, the unincorporated business associations, LLCs, and partnerships. So you can use an LLC checking account to make contributions. Contributions must be attributed to a partner, member, or owner. The issuing entity must provide detailed allocation information, and if the contribution does not include attribution information, it cannot be accepted, deposited, or otherwise used. So that's where going back, you have to capture the name, address, date, the employee's role at the LLC, etc. Non-money activity or the in-kind contributions. An in-kind contribution is a non-monetary contribution of goods or services made in coordination or cooperation with the candidate committee. There is the form 31J1 for listing out the in-kind contributions, and they do count towards the contribution limits. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to that if you're getting a lot of in-kinds from the individual. Permitted expenditures, everything that you see for a campaign, yard signs, mailers, etc. Anything related to the performance of official duties of the candidate, would be something on the public office side, and that would go to the Ohio Elections Commissions. But yeah, it's just important to, list things that you're purchasing with your campaign funds, and always be extremely transparent with that. Expenditure verification. Verification is extremely important. You want to always keep your receipts and log. If you don't have a receipt, like a copy of the check that was cashed, etc. It's easy to get a paper check. It's just having that verification is extremely important for your records. And then going back, you want to capture their name, street address, date, amount, and the detailed purpose of what the expense was. So if you use like a Walmart receipt, for example, obviously it'd be better to do two separate purchases if you were purchasing something for the campaign, like a couple things for the campaign, a couple things not for the campaign. You want to, it'd be better to have two separate transactions. So everything on that receipt, is listed for the campaign. So that amount goes towards your records. Keeping the receipts is extremely important. Every reimbursement needs to be validated with receipts provided by the payee. So if you are paying someone to do a service, you want to keep that. If you are paying like campaign staff to drive around the district or city in which you're running, and you're paying them mileage, you want to keep track of mileage logs just so you have that to document when you file your reports. After filing a report, they're examined by the SOS or the Board of Elections, depending on which office you're running for. They're examined for compliance, and any issues are communicated in writing. And you have 21 days to respond. The disclaimers must include paid for by your committee's name, must be conspicuously placed, and must be included on all items unless an exemption exists or is granted in writing by the Secretary of State. And then, like I said earlier, all campaign finance records must be retained for at least 6 years, and that includes all of your bank statements, receipts, invoices, canceled checks, and deposit slips. If you do paperless banking, you want to keep those records. Typically online, they'll save for, I use Chase Bank, and I feel that it saves longer than 6 years, but if your bank were to like only save online for 4 years, you would want to make sure that you save them before they go away. And then terminating a committee. If you no longer need the committee, you must have a zero balance, no outstanding loans or debts, request the termination at the board or the secretary's office. Otherwise, you have to continue to file future reports for your campaign committee. And here are some of the top 10 reporting errors the campaigns have with their reports. Missing data, whether it's addresses, dates, or other empty fields. Missing expenditure verifications, those receipts. Direct corporate contributions. Remember, you can't have direct corporate contributions. Cover page balances. Cash contributions over $100, improper use of fundraiser itemization exemptions, vague purpose reported for expenditures. You want to be specific with those as you are listing them out. Reporting the wrong period. If your expense date doesn't match which should have been in that period, obviously that would be an error. And then failure to use the correct balance brought forward from the previous reporting cycle. And then finally, the unverified reimbursements. So money that's being used without a clear purpose as to why. A little bit about the cybersecurity part of the office is, everyone can be a target, and our office works really closely with different other government agencies. We do have cybersecurity liaisons now at the office around the state. So just in my region of 14 counties, I have one for the northern half and one for the southern, 2 cybersecurity liaisons who work with the boards of elections. So you can always reach out to the board of elections and get connected with them if you feel that you've been targeted in that regard. And then you can scratch out Susie. I gave you all my business cards. And then that's the phone number for the campaign finance division. It's at 614-466-3111. And we are always here to help you all out. You have my contact information, and as you do run and start to fundraise, if you can't get an answer to your question at the Board of Elections, which you'd probably be able to, feel free to reach out to us. But honestly, the boards of elections do a great job. They want to see candidates do this successfully and make sure that everything is properly filed. So yeah, thank you all so much for having us tonight. And yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we get you guys to come back up here, and then we can have questions about what he talked about and go into some of our other stuff. Because the other guys that are here have all been veterans of filing these reports versus, Ken, have you ever had to actually file a report yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So a few things I want to hit on before, and then just some observations, and then see if we can open up for questions about what Ken talked about, and just basically the rules of the filings. One thing I should have mentioned early on is that the filing deadline for school boards and trustees is August 4th this year. August 4th.
4 p.m.
4 p.m. Not 4:01. Not so. If you have a interest in running for one of those things, August 4th you got now. That's the bad news, because you go, oh, it's like it's close, but it's really not that hard to. And I always think it's funny, people running around with their petitions and so forth. And what I find is, getting those signed, you only need for school board, and I think for trustee, John, you only need 25 signatures. 25 valid signatures. And so one of the things that we didn't talk about, or Ken didn't talk about, is there's a difference between partisan and nonpartisan races. So the races for things like trustees, judicial race, well, some judicial things have primaries, some don't. But the races that don't have primaries, this is the easy way to remember this, those are nonpartisan races. In which case, your signatures can be Republicans, Democrats, or Independents on your petition. If you are doing something that has a primary, like state rep or commissioner or auditor or something like that, those have a Republican and Democrat primary, then the signatures on your petition have to be either Republicans or they can be no party people on the petitions then. But if you have Democrat signatures on the petitions, they don't count. And petitions, other than August 4th, petitions, which is the first obstacle, is it's important to make sure your petition's complete. If you add information to a petition after people have signed it, that's technically breaking the law.
Yeah.
Like so for example, some people, like commissioner has different offices or different dates, so you'll look at a petition and they'll fill in on commissioner for January 1, January 2, January 3, there's 3 offices. And if you have the wrong date, or you leave it blank and fill it in later, technically that's a flaw, and it'll end up getting reviewed by the Board of Elections to determine whether you get kicked out or not as a result of that. So, but in the nonpartisan things like what are coming up, school boards, trustees, those are 25 valid signatures. You can submit up to 3 times that number, so 75 signatures. You can't submit more than that. Never submit like 1 or 2 or 3 pages. Submit as many, break them up across a lot of pages. Why do you do that? Because if you make a mistake on a page, like if you didn't sign it, if you have the count wrong for how many signatures, or the block where you fill in, how many signatures did I witness on this form? If you fill in the wrong number, it kicks the whole petition page. And so if you put too many signatures on one page, or only handing a couple pages, you always want to expect that you could have a page or 2 kicked because of some mistake you just made on the page that causes all those signatures to be kicked. And once I believe the rules are, but you want to consult with the Board of Elections and the Secretary of State site and the guidebooks, but if you submit your petitions early and they get rejected early, like by the staff themselves, you can do petitions again at that point. But if you do, maybe if you do it at the last minute, or they go to a review when it's then after the deadline, where the Board of Elections, because they'll have a review of petitions that appear to have defects on them. So And if you had one page, you're 10 pages and you didn't have enough because you got a page thrown out, it's not, you can't use the old pages. You have to start over with all new. But 25 is not that hard. So
The only other thing I'd say is August 23rd is the filing deadline for write-ins. Sometimes,
Okay.
in really local races, school boards, etc., if 3 candidates are running, maybe 3 individuals didn't run. So to be a proper write-in candidate this year, the filing deadline is August 23rd. So if only 2 people were to file for like a school board race and there's 3 seats, you'd want to run as a legitimate write-in candidate. You'd have to go to the Board of Elections and file that 1-page form that says your name will actually be a valid write-in.
that's an important point too, is people think when you write in, when it has a write-in space on there, you'll notice on your ballot, sometimes there's a write-in space and sometimes there isn't. There's only a write-in space if somebody's filed as a write-in. Okay, and if you write in some other name, it doesn't count. Write-ins only count for people who have actually filed to be write-ins. And that's how you know somebody's filed to be a write-in, is because there'll be a write-in space on your ballot. If you file, Julia Carney told me that if you file and then you decide you don't want to run, you can, if you withdraw within like about 30 days from when you file, then your name won't even be printed on the ballot. If you do it after that, then it's too late and your name will be on the ballot.
Yeah, I'd let them know as soon as
And
possible.
Chris, in some of these small races, this happened in Williamsburg Township where a trustee messed up their petitions. So they end up filing as a write-in candidate and they won. So they had a good enough campaign and, to educate people. So if you're a write-in candidate, you really gotta educate people. And it probably has to be a small race because over a large area, that would be very difficult. But it has happened and it can be something that comes up.
Okay, so the other things I wrote down, and then I'll see if you guys, like tips that you guys remember that Ken didn't cover. The EIN requirement that Ken mentioned, so some people might not even know what an EIN is. It's basically like a social security number for a business or something like that. You don't technically need it, but most banks want you to have it, so, and it's like an IRS form to get one. And it's basically, even if you were a sole proprietorship business, you could get an EIN, so you're not giving people your social security number. You give them like this federal ID number for that. The in-kind and the limits, one of the things, if you have volunteers, you might wonder when it's personnel on your campaign. If you have volunteers that just work for your campaign, that is not an in-kind. If you have, say, let's say it was me, and somebody was paying me to help Nick Owens with his campaign, that's then an in-kind, because I'm being paid to do that by somebody. So sometimes that comes up with if somebody's paying, so if somebody says, oh, you can go, this came up with my wife on something, my wife's a professional artist, and the Board of Elections was saying she needed to show an in-kind, that she was done work. Well, she's like, no, I'm just a volunteer. Nobody was reimbursing me for my time. But say she had worked at an agency or something, and her boss told her, you can go ahead and do work, for this candidate, then that would be an in-kind. And the other thing I noticed that I think is on the forms, you mentioned it, Ken, but social events. Social events are fun. The forms are a pain in the, what? Because for social events, you have to have 2 separate forms, basically for each event, which is receipts and expenses, and then that has to feed up to your regular forms. So they're a huge pain in the event. So that'd be the number one reason you don't want to do social events, is because the forms are a pain in the neck. And I'm going to mention PACs here, because I've been involved. Let's say that there's a school levy or something that could be on the ballot, and you're against it, and you want to get a group of people together to be against it. That's a PAC. So I see one person here who's done this before. And it's basically all the same forms that you do, but you go register at the Board of Elections as a PAC, and when it's more than, if you just do something all on your own, that's okay, you can just do it. Okay, they just decide, I'm going to make signs, I'm going to put them up. But as soon as you get a group of your buddies together to say, hey, we're really for or against this thing and we want to do our own thing, then you have to do forms for that. And all right, so I just hit a lot of things there. What things, for people that have done the petitions and the forms and all that kind of stuff, what other things do you guys think are important?
So one thing is make sure that people use their legitimate signature. So when they go to check the petitions, they will look at the signature, and so you say, well, that person's signature, you can't really decipher what it says or what their actual signature is. You can have that person then print over their signature, their name, or off to the side, but they have to actually give their signature. If they just print, that doesn't count. It has to be the signature. Also, it cannot be in pencil. So that seems a little silly, but it's true. And also, now this probably isn't as important in a room like this with small local races, but say for instance, and this might be the case in, say for instance, Loveland, in the city of Loveland or Loveland School District, where you're in 3 counties, you need to keep your petition specific to the county. So when you go to turn in your petitions, and you generally file in the most populous county. So if you're running for state rep, when I ran for state rep in a multi-county district, I filed in Claremont County, although I live in Brown County. And when I had my petitions filed or signed, I had a stack of petitions that were purely Claremont signatures and then purely Brown County signatures. So if you're ever in a multi-county or sort of jurisdiction, that's how you hold that. And so just make sure when you do your petitions, and also there's a bad habit of people when they say they have their petitions and they show up somewhere and they just pass their petition, and they usually have a clipboard to it, say, hey, just pass it down the row, and you're running for office, you want to be nice to people and work the room. But technically, you need to witness every signature that is signed on that petition. If you don't witness everyone, when you sign that at the end, you're committing a felony of the 5th degree, because you make a certification at the end, and there's multiple places on the petition that says whoever violates this violates a felony of the 5th degree. So it sounds really serious, and it is serious. People have been held accountable in this county and other places, but if you just follow the rules, it's nothing to worry about. Another issue is when you're filing, doing petitions, a candidate cannot sign their own petition. Can't sign someone that circulated it before for them, but a person who circulates a petition on your behalf cannot sign that petition, but they can sign a petition somebody else circulates. So I give you, for instance, say you want to help someone circulate, someone's running for office, say John Q. Smith's running for office, and you want to help them by getting a petition circulated. You can sign the candidate's petition that he or she is circulating, but you can't sign the one you're circulating yourself. And on to that end, additionally, if you are a candidate and I'd usually just circulate all my petitions myself, so I know that every signature that I got, and that if there's any issues, I can confirm them. But if you have somebody helping you, or you're helping someone get a petition, you can't say, oh, John, give me that petition that you have been watching somebody sign. I'll help get some signatures on that petition. The petition is unique to the person who circulates it. So you can't have multiple people circulating the same petition. So, it's once you've done a few of them, it's really not that complicated, but you just got to make sure you do that. And the biggest thing is when you have terms or offices you're running for, what's called the part petition on the front part, is all often some people will be like, oh, we signed my petition. Well, they never filled out what they're running for and those type of things. So you have to make sure the petition's completely signed and filled out before you start to circulate it. So, I mean, these petitions are well drafted petition that very much follows the law. So if it's on the petition, or if there's a box for something, or if there's something to fill in, generally, there's some things where you can leave out in some races, but generally 9 times out of 10, most races, everything that's on the petition needs to be filled out. So don't ever think that you can leave something blank.
So Tom or John, something about anything you want to share that based on what Ken talked about?
I would just say, first of all, if you decide to run, go to your local board of elections. They're very, very helpful. They'll get you started.
At least ours is. We can't speak for Hamilton counties.
Right, at least for Claremont County. They've been very helpful. They'll give you the forms you need up front, like you're gonna need this, you're gonna need that. But also the Secretary of State website has all these forms as well. And it's a great resource to You can print your own petitions off there, you can get the rules, like all the things you were just talking about, those rules are listed there. It's like a candidate's corner kind of thing. But the Secretary of State website is very useful for finding all these forms and understanding what you need to do.
So Tom, now you're different because when you're running, if you run for like state rep, you do your stuff through the Secretary of State versus through the local board of elections. So it's a little bit different, but any insights you have?
Well, Hamilton County Board of Elections are nice too. And you wouldn't know which one's a Republican or Democrat when you deal with them. You just wouldn't, they keep it very on the level. And the most important thing, I think, is you can't witness your own signature. So you can't sign your own petition. And so many people, whether they're volunteers, the candidate themselves, they just get caught up in that. But that's the case. You just can't witness.
So even if you have do all your own petition, make sure you do all your own, you can have at least one that's like your spouse or somebody to do the one where you sign it.
If
Because it has to be somebody else witnessing your signature. One thing in Claremont County, that I just want to mention is I always think it's funny when people they go to the Board of Elections to pull petitions. Now you can go to the Board of Elections, they're extremely helpful, but you don't have to do any of that stuff. You can just go download it off the Secretary of State site, go for it. It seems confusing because there's a lot of petitions, but if you look close, it's not really that hard to figure out which petition is for which office, if you have questions about it. But in some places like Claremont County, the pulling the petitions is a big thing because I knew a guy that, it was like 15 years ago, he told me he was wanted to run for school board. He went down to the Board of Election to pull his petitions, and by the time he got home, there was already a message on his answering machine from somebody saying, I heard you're running for school board. So a big thing that happens with you have to be aware of is there's like probably a little bit of a gossip network of who came in, and you'll go in there and they have the book there, which you don't have to fill out the book even if you're there. And they ask you to fill out the book, which is that you signed out petitions, but that's all, I don't know, that's like legacy. That's like how things evolved, ritual that's evolved in Claremont County. It's not necessary. One thing that for trustee and school board races, there's a section on the petition where it says your committee, where you fill out like names of people on your committee. And I had no idea what that was for. But I found out what it's for is if you're running for one of those offices and you fill in that committee, maybe for other things, but if you leave office, okay, like it happened with Bonnie Batchelor. So Bonnie Batchelor became a commissioner, left office. Had she filled in the committee on her petitions when she ran for trustee, those people get to pick her replacement. Okay? If you don't fill that in, then like the remaining trustees or the remaining school board members get to pick your replacement. So if you think you might not serve a full term or something might come up, that committee is then who gets to pick your replacement if something should happen to you and you're not running. Okay. Anything else on stuff that Ken talked about, rules and regs?
Well, just on that last point, in West Claremont School Board, they had a school board member pass away in office. And then the remaining members, the 4 could not agree. It was 2 versus 2. It ended up going to a local judge to decide.
Right.
So it's another reason to have a committee on.
Yeah, fill in a committee on there. But it's very confusing when you see those petitions, what that's for, but that's what that's for. That may be for something else too, but I don't know other things that it is relevant to. Okay, are there any questions people had that are sitting here? So Pam had her hand up first, John.
Can I sign multiple candidates' petitions?
Yes, the answer
Yes.
is yes. You could, some people make it like a big deal, like it's like it's an endorsement to sign somebody's petitions. And on the gossip network, people pull petitions and you could be, oh, he signed her petition or she signed his petition, but I've never refused to sign anybody's petition. I don't know what your guys' philosophy is, but I've never refused to sign anybody's petition. All it is letting them run.
Is like a school board that has 3 openings. If you can sign up to 3, but if you sign the 4th one, they only count the first 3 that they check. So.
Oh, I didn't know that. So okay, hold on. So this is important. There's a limit when it's on these field races?
Right. So I know in Cincinnati City Council, for example, there's 9. You could sign 17, but the first 9 return theirs in. They actually have a column that you signed a petition. And once you have number 10 will not count, even though you're a registered voter, even though you might have signed that person's first, but they were the 10th one or the 12th one you
I
turn
didn't
it
know
in. Yeah, so, now, and therefore, on a state rep race, there's only one running, if you sign both people's petition, again, it's the first one who gets in there who gets their petitions checked.
Now, doesn't those, like city council, when so people I know, in Ohio, we have a thing called home rule, where a city or a village can have a charter, and the charter can have like goofball rules and stuff in there. Is that why the petition process for city council that became an issue when it went to the court and stuff like that? Is that because it's part of the charter that lets them do something different, or you don't know, or not, or you know what I'm saying? Like
Well,
when
it
you have
depends
these
whether
weird.
the state and the charter conflict. So if the state law is silent in an area, a home rule village or city can create their own law that that further enhances the state law. There's a big body of case law on this, but it can't really necessarily be in conflict with the state law. But if the state law is silent on the area, the charter can fill in the gaps and make it more onerous in the sense.
Yeah.
And I'll say just one thing on so I learned something with Tom, but say for instance, we talk about in a party primary election, you're supposed to get Republicans or Democrat signatures. When if there's a nonpartisan person, meaning they haven't voted in a primary, and they go to sign your petition, there's a certification essentially saying, I am a Republican or I am a Democrat. Just because you haven't voted a primary, you can, but I wouldn't advise anybody, if you're gonna sign a petition, don't be signing someone who's running in the Democratic primary, and don't be signing one in the Republican, because you're sort of making a certification that's opposite of the petitions.
It's amazing how in Ohio, despite 12 years of education we get with state standards, how many people don't know that in Ohio, your party is determined by your primary voting pattern. You don't declare what party you are, but you can, the reason why I think conceptually, I'm not saying legally, you can sign a petition when you're a no party person for a Republican, for example, is because you're stating your intent that you're gonna vote in that primary. So when you're no party, but the vast majority of people in Ohio, I think, are no party. You know, like half the whole voter people. So one thing important is, if you watch this, if you don't vote in primaries, especially in Claremont County, because the primary kind of controls the election. I'm sure in Democrat counties like Hamilton County largely has become, the primary controls a lot of offices, not the general election in there. Okay, John, you had a question.
Yeah, so whether it's voter registration cards or applications for absentee ballots, or what we're talking about here with candidate petitions, is it true, correct me here, that the candidate, or any person for that matter, can fill out everything for the voter, or voter to be, the registration card in this case, with the exception of that voter's signature? Is that true or not true?
That's true.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, that's true. And so when you have a petition, like if you're running for something that's solely within a township and you're good at using PDF files and stuff, you could go pre-fill in on that petition like Union Township, so they don't even have to write that, because the only thing you can't write for them is their signature, but you could write other things for them on that form, and that's not a problem. There was something else I was gonna say about the petitions when you fill in the in those spaces. Might come back to me.
I'll say this again to what John's point. There's the candidate guide that comes out every year. Odd years have more races because of local races, but then the even years they have. But it's fantastic. Each office, they have the requirements of that office. And they also have the form number, then which you can cross-reference with the website of the Secretary of State. But if you really want to get in the weeds and you want to talk, there's an additional manual that has the campaign finance manual. It's broken up in multiple PDFs, and me and Chris have talked about. It's kind of frustrating. I wish it was one PDF. And there's also a thing that the election officials use, which is called the Election Official Manual, which is about a 600-page PDF that talks about things like John Becker just talked about, or just asked about, that usually has those type of insights about whether or not you can do those things, and sometimes have case law citations. But the Secretary of State's website is a fantastic resource, and it's written in a way that's not completely legalese.
The thing, Nick made a good point, says that's something to take back to your office, Ken, is that when you go on the website for the finance handbook, every chapter is a separate PDF. And it'd be nice to have one you could click on that was, I want to download the full book at one time,
So you
not,
could search within
so
it.
you can search across all the sections at one time versus have to keep downloading the stuff. One thing too, I think is important is you can copy petitions. So you see people where, you know, you want to make sure, you want to have somebody that's done petitions look at your petitions probably before you even get them signed. But once you've made one where you signed it as the candidate, because it's kind of like where the candidate signs it, and then there's where whoever circulated it signs it and witnesses. Once you have a good one, you don't have to keep re-signing one as a candidate. You can make copies of that and use it, and other people can use it. So you can have once you have a good version that you know is legal, because you can make a mistake. If you fill them out all individually when you're as a candidate, you can make a mistake on one, you know, just because, but if you know you have a good original one, go get that copied, and then just give it to your friends, whoever's gonna circulate a petition for you. You don't have to sign them all individually.
So when it comes to a candidate petition, it sort of makes sense if you're running for statewide office and you're looking for 1,000 signatures and you're running for governor or senate, it would seem crazy that the governor or the governor running for re-election would sign, 500
Thousands of
petitions
pages.
or whatever. And so what the Secretary of State of the Board of Elections requires the candidate have one unique wet signature and then of course you can have as many. But here's the big kicker. This happened in about 10 years ago in Claremont County. I'm sure, John remembers the history in here. There was a candidate running for commissioner who actually had gotten the party primary endorsement and had made copies of his petitions, both front and back. And so it was okay to have a front copy as long as you had one original of the candidate, but he had made copies, he had filled out the circulator statement. So the circulator statement on the back is whether it could be the candidate or the same person, but every time you do an individual petition, that's a fresh signature with the amount of signatures. And so that person who very likely in Claremont County with the party endorsement would have became a commissioner, but because he messed up his petitions was booted from the ballot.
Bob Turner.
Because remember when the circulator signing the back is taking it when they're done. It's supposed to be when they're done and saying, yes, I witnessed 23 signatures on this petition, so forth. If you cross one out, if somebody makes a mistake and you cross out a line, don't count that. If there's one that you're uncertain of, like you think maybe a Democrat's on your petition, you're running a Republican primary, you can just leave it and count it as the ones you witnessed, then let the Board of Elections say it's not valid on your thing. All right, any other questions on just the rules? So I want to move us along here. Okay, so the next things we had on the agenda were
I'm
good for a little bit.
okay. So if Ken gets up and leaves while we're still going, it's because he's angry at us for
No, I'm good.
his poor reception and welcome here.
I'm good. And then my wife was like, she's on call, so we're good.
So if he has to go, we want to, so Ken will probably have to go at some time before we're done. And we want to thank Ken for coming and for spending his evening here
Thank
in
you.
beautiful Union Township. Okay? All right, so the next thing here down here is, so I had one time Tom Brinkman, who's a great guy, and told me about, gave me some, always good for insights, and was there in the house when Larry Householder was there the first time and the second time. So has seen lots of things, has seen winning and losing, has overcome an endorsed candidate in a win, and has been there. You've done it all, okay? Ran in congressional races, and thank you for coming. Now let's move on. So you have a lot of insights, Tom, and I one of the things we're going to talk about running for office beyond the mechanics. And one of the things I really like that you told me one time is knowing whether you're running as an insider or an outsider, and your philosophy as to campaign style. So why don't you share some thoughts with people on that?
Well, thank you. I was counting the other day, I've run 16 times. I've won 12, I've lost 4. And I think that's don't be afraid of losing. People win, people lose. You learn a lot more from losing than you do from winning. And so many times you can, candidates lose because They've won all along, and they just kind of go through the motions, and they don't really have any energy, and they can get knocked off because of that. So you should always be, try your hardest and do your best, but if if you lose, shame on the voters. They lost a great candidate, but you can always come back, and you should think about doing that. As far as the inside-outside, what I kind of remember from it is that, several times you're running with the party endorsement, and there's things you can do that are very helpful. They have a lot of mechanisms in place with precinct executives, and they may have a sign list. They may have some big donors that you can utilize if you are kind of the endorsed candidate, the insider. Typically, incumbents are in that situation. Once you won, you're the incumbent. They like to protect incumbents because they kind of know what's going on. They haven't had a DUI yet, so they have to get rid of them. But they're doing their job, and they're doing okay. And that's certainly it's comfortable, and it gives you a leg up, but it also can lead to complacency. So you have to also remember, even though you're getting a lot of that support, you really got to get out there and hustle to make sure you don't lose. You don't want to lose. But if you're in a situation where you're running from the outside, where you're an outsider, you're not necessarily the party favored or the party endorsed or the incumbent, there's a lot of other groups out there, people that find themselves more issue-oriented. The party's a mechanism. They want to have people in place. They want to make sure the trains run on time, that people are appointed, that things just move along. But a lot of folks, whether it's the pro-life, Second Amendment, people against higher taxes, people are concerned about a plethora of issues. And the party, the inside people typically don't address those. They're just there because they are the incumbent. So the several times I've run as an outsider, I've looked at where is a big issue. When I first ran, the big issue was that Ohio spending was out of control. And I remember taking these charts around everywhere I went through this, and it got people concerned. And I was able to knock off the Republican endorsed candidate. The next time I beat an incumbent was Common Core was a big issue. The party, we don't know what Common Core is. We're just trains running on time, everything's going well. But the public was getting very concerned about Common Core being foisted upon the students and the damage that would happen. So I tapped into that. Now, the folks that were concerned about it was the traditional Tea Party folks, and some other groups kind of got together really concerned about this. Because they were fired up, they were willing to do the door-to-door and do the door knocking and put up signs and really had some energy. That was contrasted to the party mechanism, which was like, well, he's the incumbent, we'll go through the motions, we'll make sure somebody's there at the poll. They really didn't do enough to overcome this fire that was growing out there. I can see a similar thing happening with critical race theory. Now, let me give you an example of what I've been going through. In January, everybody was screaming and yelling about election integrity. Election integrity. They're call me, write me, whatever. But that really wasn't driving people to do anything. Next, it was the mask mandates. And people were upset. They're yelling and screaming about it. They were mad about the governor's mask mandates and things like that. Again, people were upset about it, but again, was that going to drive them to do anything? Next was the vaccine passport. Again, a lot of people were concerned about that. Even maybe people losing their job if they don't take the shot. Again, a lot of concern, whatever. But critical race theory, people are up in arms over it. And it's going to cost a lot of people their positions, mostly school boards and some local positions, because that's something people are really fired up with. So as an outsider, you would really want to tap into that. Now, I'm not telling you to do something that you sit there and go, well, I really like critical race theory, so I'm going to say I'm not like it. You got to be honest. But if there's an issue that is really driving a lot of discussion, a lot of interest by people, so that's really playing the outside game. Find out what that issue is, where that outrage is, go to those meetings, listen to what they have to say, educate yourself on it, and then say, I am gonna lead that, that banner, I'll carry the banner, I'll lead the parade, I'll lead the charge in that area, and that'll get more attention than, again, somebody who's complacent in the outside or in the inside and doing nothing. In Forest Hills, which is across the border, Anderson Township, Newtown School District, basically they have 3 incumbents who aren't even gonna run because they were asleep at the switch when this was put in there by the superintendent. And then they went and found that the superintendent's been interviewing for jobs in other places in Ohio. So they're in outrage mode right now. But there is a group who wants critical race theory because they got it in there. And they do have a member on the school board, and she's big for it. So it's going to be a very contentious election. But that's where you really tap into that inside-outside. See what's going on. See if there's. Now I've run races where there is nothing. There's nothing there. You thought you were going to have something there. You thought there was going to be some energy, and it just wasn't there. You still got to work hard, but sometimes it just doesn't work. And you learn from that. You learn from that. You got to have a good issue to get people motivated too.
So I think, and a lot of times on the school board races, at least in Claremont County, the party is basically not involved, and should be, by the way, should be involved, but has not historically been involved. Because to me, there's no more important job, elected official in a county than school board, from the standpoint, it's the one role that determines what the next generation of citizens is gonna look like. And most other jobs in a county, they can talk about commissioners, all these people, they can talk all till they're blue in the face about how they're pro-life, they're pro-Second Amendment, but most of the other jobs at a county level or in a township, they are business operational jobs. They're not making decisions on those kind, the hot button issues. They're running a business, which is county and township government. School boards are really important. So I have, and some of the people in the club have been involved with, there's a thing called a contract with the district, which is a 10-point pledge. You can choose all 10 points or some of the 10 points that are hot button issues for candidates to be on the record. Our club and me, we don't endorse, so I like people running, but I like it to be clear how people stand, okay, and get them on the record. If anybody's ever noticed, politicians like to talk to you one-on-one, that's so that they can tell you what you want to hear when they're talking to you and tell the next person what they want to hear. But the contract with the district has a point on critical race theory on it, but also has comprehensive sexuality education on there. There's other hot buttons in education right now that are coming up, at least on the conservative side. I guess on both sides, it's just different viewpoints on those issues. Kids getting counseling or medical therapy, like hormone treatment, without their parents being involved. Stuff like this, that's all part of the 10-point contract with the district, which is for candidates and board members to stay where they stand on those issues. Now, one other thing, Tom, before we go on, you said, anybody have any comments on what Tom said so far? I want to ask him about something else in a second here.
Interesting.
Inside, outside. Yes, sir.
I was just going to ask, when it comes to being an incumbent, is it important to also strive for that issue that, say, an outsider is trying to go for as well, or do you stick with, say, what you ran on the first time, assuming that problem is still there?
Well, I would say that you would want to be able to say mission accomplished. I said I was going to bring financial security to the district, or in your case, because you're talking about school board, or whatever, or you would want to address that issue. Now, if you're an incumbent like in Forest Hills, where critical race theory came in during your watch, you got a lot of explaining to do. And that's why none of them are running, because it went right by them. They were asleep at the switch. An incumbent typically is protected by the party or the group by saying, hey, we all went along with this. There's reasons why. Here's why we did it. And they would just say that's not an issue, but here are some other issues we're addressing. Like the AstroTurf on the football field, or getting a better new curriculum or something like that. Or maybe their big issue is this transgender therapy, and we don't want to. We're concerned about that. So you can always push back on some issues.
One question.
Debbie?
Isn't there something to also name recognition? People just go to the ballot and they recognize that name from the time before or whatever. And if they haven't done anything really bad, they'll re-elect them.
Well, that's certainly the power of incumbency. You also get put in the position, let's say they're having the community count, your meeting's upstairs, right? You come in as the elected official. Typically the other elected officials let you speak. They say, thanks for helping us in Columbus for that. You have some inside knowledge as being the incumbent, but also you get name ID. Your name appears in the paper as much or as little as you want. All I can say about that is that sometimes people do it a little too much and they become somewhat trite and, oh, here they go again, that type of thing. Now, to your point, there are some very unknowledgeable voters who go in there and they say, oh, I've seen that name again, boom, I'll just pick it. And after running 16 times, that's kind of where I am right now. So, but, you know, that's okay. They spell your name right. There's nothing wrong with that as a candidate. But yeah, that there is some power in the incumbency. And that's why you find most of your new candidates run for open seats, where it's two no names. And that's how I first got in, is my previous state representative, Jackie O'Brien, was term limited. And there was a gentleman named Steve Adams, who I ran against in 2000. And because we both didn't have that much name ID, and we had to run on issues. But the party will tell you, the first thing people look at is name ID. Name they recognize. Second is party affiliation, R or D behind their name. That's great in a general election, but in a nonpartisan election like trustee, it's not there. Or in a Republican primary, they're both R's. So then you go to issues. People say, what do I associate with them? Dusty Rhodes is a good example in Hamilton County. Everybody's heard of Dusty Rhodes. He brought the Beatles into town in 1965. He ran as a Democrat. He won, but he had to get in there during a scandal. He won, but over time he was identified as being fiscally conservative and really pushing conservative issues when the county was Republican. Now the county has turned Democrat and liberal. The Democrats just kicked him out because he's a conservative. They literally have kicked him out of the Democrat Party. So, but he still has a name ID. If he runs as an independent, he would probably win. In 2 years.
One of the things for school board is, remember, school board or trustee is they're field races too. So it's a different nexus because you just have to be, like on school board, one of the top 3 vote getters, or one of the top 2 vote getters on trustee. So they're field races, nonpartisan ballots, and so it's a little bit different. It's a different kind of animal than a primary and general election type of approach.
One thing that's interesting, there's a candidate up in Warren County's one. His name is Scott Lips, and he puts 2 lips on all of his material. Lips, trying to get that name ID, okay? I remember a candidate whose name was Clark, so they used the Clark bar. They same exact typeface as a Clark bar, and when they were doing parades, they throw out Clark bars. Because again, name ID is a big deal. I'm sure there's candidates that, again, were baseball players or football players or golfers, whatever they use. They'd have a golf ball or something that, again,
Frank
it's name
tells-
ID, you want to get
Frank
it.
tells people down here, he gets it with La Rosa's Pizza.
Yeah. So again, that happens, but sometimes it can be bad too. We had Corin Nixon for many years, and he had to run back in the 70s even with Richard Nixon at the time, which could have been an outcome.
So here in Claremont County, the Claremont County party doesn't really get involved in off-year elections. The township parties might a little bit, but it's not the same. When you run in a primary thing here, the one of the things this is my editorial opinion, is when you have a party-dominated county, whether it be liberal or Democrats or Republicans, there tends to be a pretty big insider group, and they ultimately want you to be beholden to them. Okay, so that you're beholden to the party. So that's why you find a lot of times that in counties that are very lopsided Democrat or very lopsided Republican, that you'll tend to have low information elections. Because, you just vote the way you're told. You get handed something, you get whatever, you vote the way you're told. And it's not good. I don't think it's good for America. It's competition and knowing and hearing people. We have sometimes here where people have never been in a candidate forum and get elected to an office. And so you really have no idea how they stand because you've never heard them talk. You've never heard them you know, incumbents a lot of times will avoid any sort of interaction.
I was
Play
just
it
at
safe.
my last parade ever, Mount Washington Parade.
You're never going to another parade.
Well, I sat there, my wife drove the car, and I waved, and I saw new candidates with 10 people and 16 people, whatever. I couldn't find that many people who'd go walk in a parade for me. All the people who were all fired up when I first ran, they're old,
Tired.
they're
They
tired,
moved to Claremont County.
they
Tom,
moved to
tell the truth.
Claremont County. But they also say, Brinkman, you've run 16 times, everybody knows your name. You really don't need me, I'm more interested in something else. So you find that enthusiasm as you start with, is you really kind of got to bring that along, because people do, they're tired, they move on. And it's not a long time, it's right away. I won with a lot of people's support in 2000 in a primary, won the general, came around then for 2002, thought I might have a primary because they just redrew the maps. I called people up and they're like, nah, you're fine. But who was there with a check? A lobbyist. Who was there with people in the party, in precincts, the party organization? They're right there. Come on, we wanted you with us all the time. That's what happens.
So
Your supporters kind of fade away. Those grassroots people who keep you balanced fade away. Now, I've tried real hard not to be the party guy. Love the incumbency, but it's tough to get people motivated.
So before we move on, because I'm just watching the time here, just real quick, Tom, one of the things is you were in a very contentious primary race, and I didn't like things being said about you and stuff like this. And I would
It hurt me too.
And I would bitch up and down about, why do you let these people say this stuff, and why don't you fire back, and why don't you do this, and why don't you do that? And you shared with me your philosophy of campaigns, that have been through a lot of them, about, you know, what you don't not doing stuff you regret in campaigns, and it's always stuck with me. But maybe talk about your philosophy of how you respond to what you think are very unfair attacks sometimes.
Well, I try to take the high road, and you get into the pen with a pig, and you're just going to get messy, and they enjoy it. It's really hard to win. So I try not to get into the gutter with that type of fight. I don't have a problem with a contrast ad. I'm here, they're there, but I don't really like to throw mud and that stuff. I've had it done to me, both unsuccessfully and successfully. But I just want to be able to say at the end, look myself in the mirror, I ran a good race, I did it the right way, and that's what I did. Now, my latest election, interestingly, probably the big issue was, for some reason, the FOP endorsed my candidate, my opponent, Democrat. And I was just on the back porch, and I was looking at her Twitter, and here she was posting, "Come get your Black Lives Matter signs. I'm passing them out." And I sent this down to the party chair. I said, "Hey, Alex, can you talk to the FOP and see what she's doing? Black Lives Matter wants to defund the police, that type of thing." And so he sent it to them, and it kind of bounced around. They didn't really want to do anything, whatever. And then I told a colleague who's very close to the state FOP, and he went and talked to them, and they were outraged because they just had a Toledo police officer shot and killed. And this is real to them. So they actually pulled her endorsement from her, and that became the issue. Is she ran around, even in the week before the election, she claimed that this is terrible that they pulled my election just because I'm for Black Lives Matters, which is to defund the police movement. And I think that did her more harm than good. Now, I was just stating a fact, bringing up something that she was bragging about on Twitter. I didn't make anything up. Here's what she did, and she was loud and proud to the end of it. But I just knew in our neighborhood that just wasn't going to stand. And so I thought I did the right thing.
So let's move on. So the next thing I had on here was John McGraw. So John, you're a veteran of trustee type races, and you put a lot of, I know a lot of your philosophies on door to door, so on and so forth, but maybe talk about your philosophy and the importance of like local politicking, walk lists, stuff like that can help you to be effective, that doesn't cost anything but time.
Yeah, I would say the biggest piece of advice is first, actually go to the meetings. So say you wanna run for school board, maybe you wanna run for trustee, start going to the meetings now and see what they're talking about, see what the issues are. So I think before you even become a candidate, make sure that's what you wanna do, and make sure you understand the real root, problems that they have. The next thing is, when you first decide to run, you're the only person that knows, and maybe then talk it over your family. But you gotta realize, each voter that's gonna come to you is one at a time. And I believe in talking to people personally, because that helps you learn what issues they have. Because you may think these 3 things are the biggest issue in this local race, but then when you go out and actually talk to people, you find out, no, they're really concerned with 3 other things that you didn't think about. So I think that interpersonal connection really helps you to understand issues better. But also, don't be afraid, even before you're elected, if they've got an issue, help them out with their issue. They've got a pothole in front of their driveway, go contact the current trustees and say, hey, this person's got a pothole in front of their driveway, help them get it fixed. All of a sudden, the crew comes out and fixes it, and you're not even an elected official. But by doing that personal touch and being part of their solution, I think you can gain a lot of respect. And the other thing with local races, you often get issues that you can't solve that are outside of being a school board member or a trustee. But don't be afraid to push that issue to the department that really needs to take care of it. So maybe they got a sewer problem. Trustees don't handle the sewer department, that's the county level. But take their problem to the sewer department on a county level and help them out with that issue. So I think going door to door, finding out what the issues are very important. And Chris, you mentioned the walking list. Most counties have a walking list of registered voters. Know your precincts, know where you're running. School board can be very complicated because it doesn't follow township lines all the time. It might be part of a township and part of another township. So you gotta know your territory, where that race is gonna be. You don't want to be campaigning someplace where
You find that's not the right place.
Right, so make sure you're in the right place. And like in Union Township, I think we have 5 different school districts, so it gets complicated. People think they live in Milford sometimes, even though they live in Union Township, their zip code is Milford, so they think they live in Milford, but they don't even realize that they live in a township. So part of it is education too, just educating people what a trustee does, because some people will say, I just moved here 2 years ago, what's a trustee? I've never heard of that. Most people kind of know what a school board member is, but I think the most important thing, I would advise anybody to start going to the meetings right away. If you're interested in doing this, then show up for the meetings, and I think that's a great place to start.
So you can get, and on the handout I put out, there's a thing where the walk list is. You can actually also just download it from the Secretary of State's site, so you can download spreadsheets for every county. Like you could download a Claremont County spreadsheet and then filter it on West Claremont School District or Milford School District, because there's columns. At first you'll be confused by, but there'll be a column for elections in Ohio have to be really difficult because different precincts can vote in. This precinct in Union Township votes Milford, this one votes for school. So there's all these overlays, but there'll be columns in there for what school district it is. So I think actually the walk list is okay. But if you know somebody or have a friend that's good with spreadsheets, download from the Secretary of State site, and then you can make your own list, not just the Board of Elections list, where you really target in. And obviously you want to target people that vote. That's step one, people that vote. If it's a partisan primary, you want to target people when you're knocking that are Republican or Democrat respectively. The one thing that's kind of scary to think about, whether you're Republican or Democrat, I think for our country, in our county, is if you go to a walk list for a partisan primary and you go to like Republican, or don't think you're going to walk, you probably need your car, because a lot of places it's only something like 13% of the people, or some ridiculously low percentage of the people that vote in the primaries. So if you go, I'm going to go knock on all the doors of people that vote reliably in Republican primaries, well, that might be, even in a neighborhood, that might be every 6th or 7th house. Right. And when you get at, so everybody should be thinking, we need more people to be voting on, and that's why we need more voter information. Everybody knows I'm like a big pro-Trump guy. And one of the things is when you have exciting candidates that are out there talking, it raises awareness and people vote. okay? When you don't have exciting candidates, or you keep them under the radar, then nobody even knows to vote. And people like Donald Trump prove politics can be entertaining and fun and enjoyable, and it can be fun to learn stuff, like when it's real versus just a mailer contest and so forth. Okay, John, anything else? Any questions for John, or things you wanted to hit on?
I had a
Renee?
couple things. So on your outreach door to door, we're in the COVID era still, where people are reluctant to open the door. What are some other suggestions for outreach? I mean, in this day and age, social media is the thing. Is that a good idea? Do you still, want to go hit door to door? And
Yeah, I believe in all of the above approach. So I would do social media, I would do door to door. If people are nervous about that, then go to like the local church festival, and that gives you a chance to relax and talk to people one-on-one. I think community events, it gives you a chance to meet people. So I think I would do a little bit of everything. But if you're not, you gotta stay where you're comfortable, so.
I was gonna say, even though I would be comfortable, and if I had my vaccine, somebody that you knock on the door, might not be comfortable with that, and to avoid altercation, because you never, you don't know whose door you're knocking on,
Right.
unless you actually know that person. So, that's where I am in that situation for just avoiding that.
So somebody had told me, Renee, that was going door to door, that when COVID was going on still, that actually they got an unbelievably warmer reception than they thought they would get, because the people were like in their houses. You're not like getting up in their grill and coughing on them and breathing on them, but people are like needing social contact.
Yeah.
So, and they're standing inside their door, talking through their door to you or something, if that's what makes them more comfortable. So, and now I think it would be very relaxed if you went and did that.
The other thing I had is, since the whole thing with Amelia, I have not missed any meetings anywhere. But when candidates are allowed to get up and introduce themselves, not to point your husband out, but they let him go up and introduce himself and what he's running for, which I agree, the meetings are publicized, and that way they get to know the candidate. But I'm running for trustee, so should they afford that same, I don't know if this is a legal question, should they, since they did it for one person, no matter if that we're not running for the same race, but should I not be afforded that same opportunity to go up and say, hey, I'm running for trustee, and be able to say a little bit about myself and what I've done? Is that a legal?
Yes, they should allow you to do that, as long as they have open participation allowed at their meetings. They can't tell one person, you're allowed to talk, but we don't like you because you're running against me, so you don't get to talk.
Right.
But I would still be respectful. I wouldn't get up there and slam them, but just state your positive
Right.
message and keep it brief.
And
One thing you don't want to have someone go on and on and on either, so.
I was at the meeting she's talking about, so I think that was a little bit confused meeting, but because of time things going on in the meeting. And so what I have observed, and this would be like if you get in office, like if you get in is have clean meetings, okay? So public participation is a certain point in the meeting, not just like randomly like, oh, we got a few minutes here. Paul, why don't you get up and talk, So have a clean meeting. What I have seen is that in small places, and I love this, in small townships where there's only a few people come to the meetings, or it might be more than Union Township come to the meetings sometimes, but they basically have people, because they know each other, like, Nick, you got anything you want to say tonight? John, you got anything you want to say tonight? Where they just go down the line. As the township gets bigger, it's got to be more organized as to, the meeting, so it's fair to everybody. So where you get in that gray area is where you kind of play it loose, and that's where you get in trouble.
Well, that's
Because
right.
everybody deserves the right to speak at public participation, and once they set the rules, they cannot discriminate to you based on content, even sometimes when they try.
And I know he wasn't on, and I'm not trying to pick people out, but that just happened the other night, and I don't know that they had him scheduled or if he would have, I know they've had,
I think they
other
just saw him
people.
there.
Well, and they've had other people
Yeah.
that they've allowed to come in and talk for school board and stuff like that for New Richmond. It was a whole, layout.
Yeah.
But the other thing, and you say name recognition and getting involved and I highly recommend, I always said when I was on, Amelia Council, you knew you were doing a good job when nobody was there. If the house is packed, something's wrong. So, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But the other thing that you guys were talking about, endorsements for a local trustee or school board, or is that something that you should seek? Because I wouldn't know the first thing about getting endorsed by anybody, other than speaking to not only the residents, but the business owners, because, the business owners are impacted a lot in races such as this too. But how, is that something you don't go with, or you try to get?
So
I
John, what's
look
your
at it
view?
both ways. There's some groups that you do want endorsements from, but at the same time, once you have their endorsement, people think you're beholden to them also. And you're no longer a free thinker. You're gonna have to do what that group wants you to do.
Apparently they haven't met me.
I think you're probably be on the more the outsider side of things.
Yeah, you
than
think?
your style, so.
So I think getting endorsements can be helpful, but the real endorsement you want is the voter voting for you. So I think that's the most important thing.
I don't know, different places you have to think at the trustee level. You used to joke with me, one time you joked with me how you could knock on a door and somebody would be like, oh, you're who? Like, I'm so-and-so, like my sign's right in your neighbor's yard. So at these trustee and school board, one of the things that I think is really good to raise the level of visibility of these races, because a lot of times as you get more local on these races, they actually have more impact on your day-to-day life than something Joe Biden's doing in DC, in the decisions that are being made there. So you have a question back there?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, and I guess this kind of goes back to that whole name recognition thing. Is it one of those things where you should, just taking the school board for example, should you be putting your name more in the school itself, whether it be helping out at band concerts or football games or whatever it is here or there? Should you be doing that so you can get your name in there more?
Oh, absolutely. I think that helps a lot because the school parents who are on the PTO or the PTA will know who you are and they'll trust you. But there's a lot of voters that don't have kids in the schools and they won't ever see that visibility. So that goes both ways. But be visible, go to the football games. That's a great place for a school board member to walk around and meet people. So the different sporting events and things like that. So I think, being active and, because the reason to run, I hope, is because you want to make your community better.
Right.
Win or lose. And if you don't win, you can still be an active participant. Go to the meetings, be concerned, bring up issues. You can get a lot done by not even being an elected official. So I think that's a good thing to do. Yes.
I think school boards, too, they've always been kind of under the radar, and it's not a ding on the people, but the people that get on school boards tend to come from an educational background. They tend to be like nice people, and so then when contentious issues come up, that's why I think probably school boards have the highest ratio of unanimous votes whenever they vote on anything. Trustees are close to most places, and we actually need some people to get involved in education, because I don't think on the macro level, there's a lot of people saying education in America's on a perfect track. It's unbelievable what we're doing. We're trying to get rid of math when in China they're trying to teach people more math, okay? So we have some serious issues in the educational system. I'm not making a representation of any particular district, but we need people to get involved in education that are willing to fight for things and not just kind of go along to get along, and I love, was it Tom who said, like, want to focus on the issue of getting the new school building or the new AstroTurf versus what are we actually teaching kids, and are we producing citizens we're proud of that we think are going to be the great next, even better generation ahead than we were. So, okay, other questions for John? What John? So I put down, the last thing, other than covering the resource real quick is, so Nick, you've been involved in lots of campaigns, things like signs, okay? By the way, depending on what you're running for, I never drove a post into the ground till I ran for something and helped people running for something. So now I've got like multiple post hole drivers and stuff like this, and I never knew where you'd order a big sign. I never knew about zip ties or where the best deals on zip ties are. But maybe talk some about, I think, Nick, you've done a little bit of everything in terms of signs, TV, mailings, so on and so forth. You've been endorsed by some party apparatus, again, not by others, but maybe just share some of your.
I think first and foremost in politics, get involved. I think that one of my biggest misconceptions is when I was starting out, I introduced myself as an attorney, but if you knew my personal background, I come from a very humble background, and you get involved. And I think a lot of people, whether young, old, or say you have to have money and connections, certainly money and connections helps. But if you look at the history of our nation, you'll see that there's a lot of candidates that absolutely came from nothing. And so it's like anything that you have a passion for, you got to just find an avenue to get involved. And the best way when it comes to politics is volunteering and just giving your time to someone. I haven't found a candidate yet running for office that doesn't want to volunteer helping them. You'd be surprised. A lot of times people think, so-and-so, they're, high and mighty, or they got this position, or they're so-and-so, they're important. You're going to find out they're just as personable or just as normal as you are, and that they would love your help. So volunteer for people. And then when you get that barrier of entry of volunteering, again, you think that it's going to be uncomfortable. You're doing something out your comfort zone. Just do it. It's like anything. Once you start to do it, you'll learn a lot. And when you volunteer, you learn from the other candidates that you volunteer from. So when you want to take that next step of running for office for yourself, you know about, where's the best place to get signs, or how do I put signs in the ground, or where do I get literature, or who do I talk to, how do I do my petitions? 80% of the political background that I have is from volunteering and watching others. Now you then pick up your own expertise, but it's like anything, just trying to learn from others. One thing Tom said earlier, you can't be scared to lose. I've lost races, I've won a race. You just never know, because there's many times where the candidate you're running against might be a long-time incumbent, but they screw up their petition, or they die. Or, these things happen, and you'll see throughout the country that there's many times where people, or they get indicted in a crime or something. It's the old saying, miss every shot you don't take. So if you don't put your name out there, you won't ever have a shot. So you can't be scared to lose, and can't be scared to put yourself in the arena. Another thing that always frustrates me in politics is it's political season, which it'll be this November for local races and next year's primary and such. But by the time it's on people's radars, people go, I want to run for office. But usually by then it's way too late. You need to be really thinking 120 days, 150 days out from when the election is. And for a partisan race, it has to be before the primary, because the ballot or petitions will be due 90 days beforehand. So always people want to get all excited during campaign season, but then they realize when they go to run the next, you need to be excited when there's nothing going on. I'll say this about a campaign. There's highs and lows, but every day when you're running a campaign, you want to just chip away, do something that has an effect on your campaign. And one thing you see in a lot of campaigns is you see candidates and their volunteers, they're really strong. It's 6 months before an election, they have all these volunteers, they're doing all these things, and then come a month before the election, what has happened? They're worn out, they're tired, and they lose their steam. And so you want to make sure you pace yourself. Another thing when you run a campaign, you have to be, one, that ability to ask others for help, and also the ability to delegate. Now it's nice in a certain type of race where a lot of people run for office are type A personalities. You want to do everything yourself. But to run an effective campaign, every campaign whether it's from city council, village council, school board, all the way to president, is reliant on the volunteers or the help and volunteers of others, particularly larger the campaign. Larger campaigns do not succeed by paying people, they succeed by getting people to give their time for free. And then when it comes to your time, make sure you cherish your time. And when you're working with voters, I mean, it's a numbers game. You got to realize that if you're looking for voters and that you want to be nice and polite to every person you meet, but they don't own you. And sometimes you'll disagree with people, and you can't be scared to tell someone that you disagree with them. And, the worst thing for a candidate is to spend 3 hours with one voter when you could have been with 50. That spent 3 hours with 50. Now there's an art to not making people upset by moving too quickly, but just know it's your campaign. You're not beholden to one single person. Now you want their input, you want their value, but it's your campaign, and stick to it and stick to your ideals. Now one of the things Chris and others tease me about is I like to put signs up. Now they're a lot of work. But I like putting signs up because when I drive places, I see my name and it makes me feel good, and so it gives me a shot in the arm. There's a lot of candidates that hate putting signs up. I don't think it's fun. By no means is it fun going to a random person's house and say, "Hey, would you like a campaign sign?" But 9 times out of 10, they're just excited somebody came to the door and asked. Putting big signs up is hard. It's good workout. But, one of the things I think signs, in my opinion, are very important for candidacies. Now, there's the old saying, signs don't win elections. They don't. You can have a candidate that has 3 times the amount of signs and then they lose by 3 times the amount. But I think what signs really do, and this is my philosophy of signs, is they show you're in it to win it. So if you're a first-time candidate and people don't really know what you're all about, but all of a sudden, everybody in the community starts talking about how you have signs at every corner, and oh, by the way, you have signs that, Betty Smith, and Betty's always had a sign of all the winners, and he's got a sign there. They talk, and so that type of stuff is those signs create momentum. They create that you're serious about things. It gives you a shot in the arm, but also it generates leads in your campaign because your friend you went to high school with, or your neighbor, or the person you go to church and says, "Hey, I saw your sign, I'm excited. I'm so glad." And then you find out people, because of those signs they saw, they want to help you. So I just think, especially on a local race, signs generate excitement, and they really get the attention to the race, because I think nothing worse than having a race where there's nothing going on. And I think you create the excitement by putting those signs out. And then so a couple last time. Social media, I think, is very important, and every year it goes by, social media is more and more important. But when you door knock, and I think everyone's door knocked in this room can tell you, there's a lot of people that have no idea what's going on social media, or they only have a handful of friends. So to John's point, you have to have an all of the above approach. So have to have a social media presence, but also have to have a grassroots door-to-door presence, have to have a sign presence. You have to have a presence anywhere you can find voters. And another thing is, like, if you're a candidate, especially, I'll use Renee for example. She's going to be running for township trustee. Every time she goes and gets her groceries, I would hope it's at Kroger. And every time you go to get your groceries, I hope you have a shirt on, because you'd be surprised how many people say, "Hey," they'll come up to you. But also, how many times when you've been in a store or you've been somewhere and you do that name recognize, you see the shirt and you go, "Oh, that's her." And you might not even go up to them or talk to them or thing. But now when you go to the doctor and say, "I remember she's at Kroger. She's one of us." Well, I mean, everyone.
I have to plan for that.
Yeah.
I actually take me.
Yeah. But I use those examples as you create your own excitement. So when it comes to campaign, it's what the work product you put in, but you have to create your own excitement in your campaign.
Now, you did some TV, Nick, so what's your...
Well, so TV's a unique...
Not that it would apply to the
yeah.
township races and stuff like this, but when you get into primary races, you could do TV and...
Yeah, so I did cable television and satellite television. Now, the way you do TV is there's the broadcast television, 9, 12, 5, 19. And I had an opponent that spent a lot of money on that, and I knew something was tricky there. But cable is actually pretty affordable, believe it or not. Now the problem is you have to, they have zones for like spectrum. So if you have a race that you're, like for instance, Union Township might be in their zone, or Pierce Township, sometimes their zones perfectly align with the geographic boundaries of the political jurisdiction that you're running in, and sometimes they don't. But so for instance, if the zones for TV zones, so for instance, I would say for clerk of courts in Claremont County, any countywide race, you can get a TV spots literally on cable, not 12, 9, 15, or 19, 5 and 19, but you can get cable television spots for $10 an ad. And you'd be surprised the difference it makes. And you gotta have someone that knows how to get the right upload mounts, but it's not really, I was able to find someone locally that did TV. Now it wasn't some highfalutin presidential commercial, but I paid $1,500 to have my commercial produced. If I would have had the knowledge base to do it, I would have been able to. I've learned through that process. But so, here's another thing when it goes to purchasing things. Anybody that runs for office, there's always people that are consultants, or you get all, I think every person that sells something gets the list of people who run for office, and they mail you all these things, and some are better than others. But don't be afraid to, search for the right price. It's you're shopping around. It's your money generally. I mean, a lot of people, especially in local races, it's hard to fundraise. You end up spending your own money. So if you need to find signposts for 4x8s, maybe Home Depot or Lowe's has the best price, or maybe you go up to, or maybe you get on the internet and you find out that you can get T-posts for 4x8s at $2. Now that's a commodity, so there's not going to be much variation, but I use this as an example. Shop around. Things you can generally find, and then find people that might be able to produce something for you that's never done politics before, but they can do just as equal as process. When it comes to getting things for your campaign, there's no perfect place. What it has to do is it's something that represents your campaign well. And if it is, then buy it from wherever you think is best.
By the way, I think the most disciplined, the best things I've seen people do that I wish that I would do when I did this stuff is, like, for example, for expenses and for contributions, like actually keep a copy of the Secretary of State form with you so that you can just write it by hand on there. Because as much as you jam shit in an envelope and receipts and stuff like this, when you then have to figure it out, if you just write it down, later you're going to do the professional version of it, and make sure you get all the fields you need at one time.
A good point that you made was, getting the right price. The first time I ran, I had like 1,000 cards printed up, and so I thought, I'm doing pretty good. I got 1,000 cards. I didn't realize I could have got 10,000 for almost the same price. So look at bulk pricing. You might get way more cards than you need, but it might be cheaper in the long run if someone's going to do a big job. Same with TV ads. Sometimes you can get bulk rates different times a day and get actually a lot more ads on. So.
Well, I was dealing with something on like cards. There's a whole subculture of where you get this stuff, that people that do political stuff, and I guarantee you, my wife's a professional artist and knows a lot of commercial printers. I have never been able to get the same prices from commercial printers that I could get from political printers. They are separate industries. So the same, and you have to, with political printers, there's certain form factors of materials. If you do that form factor, it can be dirt cheap. You want your own form factor that's 2 inches longer or 3 inches, 2 inches wider, can be through the roof, okay? So if you figure out how to do this, and I have a resource sheet here to go through. Are there some questions for, now, but one last thing before we go. Mail strategy, bulk mail, stuff like that. Maybe Nick talk a little bit about, because that's a typical thing, sending mailers to people, your philosophies or how that works.
So when it comes to your biggest expenses in your campaign, or for a higher level campaigns, are always television or radio. But in smaller, in a Claremont County race, especially a countywide race, you can't maybe cable television, but you can't do broadcast television. There's not a radio station. So for instance, in Brown or Adams County, they have a local radio station, and so it's for a small area. Think if Batavia just had the radio station, so you have that opportunity. But in Claremont County, the really only way to reach voters other than in person or at their doorstep or at events is through the mailbox. And so the best way to do that is to, and there's other candidates in the room here have done it, John Becker knows well from being a state rep candidate, is that there's a bulk rate amount and there's cards and those things. So don't think when you mail someone that you print out your envelope, you sign it all, you print it. Is you get the voter database list, you make sure you choose, do you want hardcore voters, meaning voters that only vote every election, or voters that only vote 1 out of 4 elections? And so, I think any person that you ever experienced that's been in politics for a while, they generally say, your resources are finite. You want to make sure you only target voters who are solely planning, most likely to show up, and that's your hardcore voters. There's too many candidates who run for the first time that say, oh, I want to reach every voter. Well, every voter only votes 1 out of 4 years, and that's the presidential election. So know your election, know your thing. You can also break it down. The Board of Elections will help you with this. If you were to email the Board of Elections or call them, you could say, for instance, if you're running in a school board election, I want the last 3 school board elections, I want those people who have only voted in the last 3 school board elections, and that's a very tight group. And so you want to make sure you do that. So when it comes to mailing, is making sure your universe is good for the mailing, that you're not mailing to people that are unlikely to vote, because that's just wasting money. You want a bulk rate mail, and you want to do a card. So you should never be sending a piece of mail that costs more than a postage stamp when it comes all said and done. That includes the piece of mail, that includes the design, that includes the bulk rate. What you want to do is make sure you have filtered that out. So there's an art in that. A lot of that stuff, actually Tom Brinkman's wife is very good at that. Make sure when it comes to political mail that the people you work with have experience with that, or you're getting help, because you can really throw a lot of money away by sending to too many people or not getting the proper bulk rate amount.
So I want to wrap up. One of the things I want to hit on too, real quick, is there's another thing called chasers, which are more and more important than ever, which is a little bit different than bulk rate, but the volumes of people voting absentee and absentee voting is apply to, is that you send things to people when they request from the Board of Elections a ballot in the mail. So you can work with the Board of Elections. Unfortunately, hopefully this will change, but our Board of Elections is one of the only ones where you can't automatically download the data and filter it. You have to get on a list with the Board of Elections to get the daily report of who requested absentee ballots, and then you send things to them. So you find yourself around the kitchen table sticking postage stamps on cards every night that are going to them, okay? And because you want them to get a card from you, because you know they're going to vote because they requested a ballot, okay? And then if you're really savvy, you drive down to Dalton Street Post Office, because you want to inject them in the postal system at the place where they go. If you send them to Batavia, they go downtown and then come back, because they go down to get sorted. So you drive down to Dalton Street every night and drop off your things. And then if you're really savvy, you drive around the back of the Dalton Street Post Office building, and you can inject them right at the bulk rate dock, and they don't even go through the mailboxes out front. So there's a lot of things I'm telling you that are the secrets of politicians that know you can drive around the back of the building, and it can shave hours and hours off of your postcards that you're sending getting processed, because you can hand them right to the person on the bulk rate dock in the back of the building. Technically, you're not supposed to do that if it's not at a certain volume, but I've never had somebody not do it. And so I put I know we're running tight here on time. I want to thank everybody that's come, and Penn is his wife's probably texting him going, where the hell are you?
Yeah. I hope your shoulder feels better soon. Next time I see you, you won't be in that. I told him, I said I had something very similar last January, so I feel your pain wearing that.
Thank you.
So closing thing real quick here is I put a sheet out that are just my things, and there might be other people that know this, but I'll say a couple of these things before we wrap here, so it's on the live stream. For signs, there's this place way out in Timbuktu by West Virginia or something. Athens, AGE Graphics, that I think is traditionally going to give unbelievably good prices on signs. Okay, big signs. when Nick was talking about putting up signs, there's 4x4 and 4x8 big signs. 4x4 take 2 T-posts, 4x8 take 3. And so that kind of thing, or your individual 18x24s are normal size signs. This place, AGE Graphics, is super good pricing out there, and it's a long hike to get there. So you might find if you're in a race, if you got some buddies also running in other races, to get one truck to go out and pick shit up for you and bring it back, because it is a long hike. Okay, you hear a lot of people use Patriot signage around here. I've used, and I know people have used Sign Rocket. There's some people online that do real, and you get a good price. I can tell you, you can get totally, if you go to like a local print shop to do signs, you're gonna be paying like twice to, the price per sign at least than you're gonna get when people know what they're doing. Supplies, the only thing I put on my supplies list is Harbor Freight's the best place to go for zip ties, and by far the data download, and I talked about chasers, and Tom Brakeman's wife is, I don't know if she's always the best price, but I've never had her not, I mean, she's really good. Curry Printing and Reading knows, like if you're looking for printers that can know the bulk rate process and can get it all done, she does a really good job and very high quality products. And if you're getting stuff done at Staples or FedEx, you're in the wrong place. That's the deal. So, any quick closing thoughts from you?
I got one closing tip. When you first file, you have to establish a name of your committee. So don't instantly think it has to be Renee Gerber for trustee or committee to elect. It could be, like I changed mine to Friends of John McGraw, because it allows you may be running for trustee right now, but maybe you run for school board some other time. And you can keep the same committee just by telling the Board of Elections that you're in a different race.
Okay. All right, Nick, any closing thoughts?
So I just think anybody that's interested in running for election, don't be scared of the process. There's always that scared of being the unknowns, but I think anytime someone actually gets involved and starts going there and find themselves, it could be a very rewarding process, and find out that it all comes by fast. The elections always seem that it always takes forever to get here, but then it does. Just don't be scared and throw your hat in the ring. I always encourage people, the more civic participation we have, particularly from people running for office, our communities, our state and nation are better because of that.
All right, Ken, closing thought.
I'll give you all my contact information if I haven't already, and always feel free to email us or give me a phone call. Nice meeting you all.
And thanks for staying so long. I know you had, so thank you everybody that watched online. Thank you for the people here, and appreciate your taking the time. Bye.